Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen. I've been here at Toolio for 2 years now. I think August 1st is my 2-year anniversary. But prior to that, I started my career at TJX in planning and allocation. So that's my life story as of now.
Awesome. Jen will be our moderator for the call. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Jen will be able to answer them there or surface them up and we can talk about them as a group. I'm Gigi. I'll be running the call today. I'm another one of our account executives here with Jen. I've been at Toolio for 3 years at the end of the summer. And before that, I was with Jen actually at TJX, although I don't think we ever really crossed paths. I was over in the men's division as an allocation analyst there. So I talk to hundreds of retailers a year like yourselves on how they are planning now and how Toolio might be able to help. And that's what we'll run through today. So I
Perfect.
do have a good mix of current customers and future potential customers. So wanted to give a quick overview on who Toolio is, why we exist before we dive into the demo. So a quick summary, Jen, you can see my screen, right?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. So just wanted to highlight quickly who we're working with and some of the key verticals that we specialize in. So I will say our team, as you can hear from Jen and I and the rest of the team, we're very retail focused. So as you can see with some of the brands we work with, we specialize in apparel, footwear, accessories, sporting goods. We cover a variety of verticals, but we do best with retailers who are starting to expand into different channels, maybe their store footprint, and they're looking to get out of Excel because of those ongoing complexities. So teams that are starting to grow out of their current tools like Excel start to look for a planning tool like Toolio. And really the idea of Toolio came to be way back when in 2014, when our two founders, who are Stanford grads, actually sold an app that they had developed to Walmart. In doing so, they joined the Walmart team and they were running major initiatives there, one of which included the merchandising and planning team there. So Walmart, as I'm sure many of you have thought about, they considered building something internally, which was going to take years and years and cost tens of thousands, maybe millions of dollars to produce. Or they were looking at sourcing market alternatives that really didn't fit their specific needs. So Eitan and Burke actually left Walmart back in 2019 to start up Toolio as the next generation planning platform for rapidly growing retailers like some of the team members we have on the call today. And since then, as I mentioned, Jen and I talk to so many different retailers that are interestingly facing that same issue that Walmart was when Eitan and Burke were there way back when. So most retailers like yourselves are most likely pulling from a variety of different siloed systems. So think about your ERP, your e-commerce, your BI or data warehouse tools that you come in on a Monday morning, you're constantly pulling all of these different reports. I remember doing it as an allocation analyst myself. Those different spreadsheets are hard to maintain and manage, especially across your ever-growing team. So that can lead to things, of course, easy enough to recognize is the wasted time. But as you start to dig into how that affects your inventory, you start to notice an effect on your margin or your missing sales in those best sellers, holding dead stock in those slower turners that you weren't able to accurately predict. That's when teams start to think about planning tools. So that's really where Toolio comes in. We connect and automate back those integrations to your ERP. So if you're using a tool like a NetSuite or a Dynamics, coming in and connecting back to your e-commerce site like Shopify, any other BI tools or data warehouse, automating that stream of information back into a tool. So no longer using spreadsheets there, you're working holistically in Toolio across the team for one connected planning platform that has reporting built in at every step of the way. Of course, quick time back in the day for the teams to start reallocating towards deeper analysis into how can we optimize our best sellers there? Can we start to inch out more in our turn or start to develop new product ways, grow into men's or women's, for example? So giving back time in the day to start to automate and improve on those productivity gains there as well by having a more data-driven approach. And looking holistically at where Toolio typically falls in that tech stack, I think this is something that we hear a lot, that a planning tool comes up as teams are starting to think about their tech stack as a whole. So that commerce stack that we typically see teams using, the fast growing digitally native brands are turning towards these best in class tools. So thinking about that commerce cycle, a team's typically getting started in that planning phase, which right now is probably in Excel or one of those older archaic tools. Then a team will go into the production phase where they start to build out those products to support those plans. Maybe that's in a PLM like Backbone or WFX. Then you come into your supply chain piece, which is that ERP, usually with NetSuite, maybe Dynamics or an SAP. Your online selling site like Shopify, or maybe the POS for your in-store sales. And then that flows back, of course, to analysis, all once again in a Looker or a Tableau before then beginning that planning process all over again. So it's interesting to step back and think about, where does planning sit in your overall tech stack, and where are other teams starting to invest as they're thinking about overarching tech initiatives for their team. Jen, which ERP do you think we hear the most?
Oh, definitely NetSuite. I think about 75% of our customers are in NetSuite.
That's true. Yep, we do hear NetSuite a lot, and that's definitely something. If you reach out to our team using NetSuite, we can talk about how we use that safe search approach there as well. All righty. So before we dive into the demo, wanted to do a quick overview of how we think about planning here at Toolio. So Toolio is a modular system, meaning you can pick and choose which one of these modules your team would want to get started with. Maybe it's one, two, or all three. Typically, we find teams opting in for two or all three of them, depending on the workflows of their team. And regardless, most teams get started in that merchandise planning module, and that's where we'll start the demo today. The merchandise planning module is where you run all of those top line financial plans and bird's eye view reporting. That will then push into and correlate to an open to buy. Also, a lot of what if scenarios here. So if your team is starting to grow and explore different options like new channel growth or new category growth, you can play around with what that would mean from a financial perspective. It's interesting. We find a lot of smaller teams starting to grow and iterate on that merchandise planning piece. So using it here with Toolio will provide a lot of those best practices that we've learned and iterated on with our customers. We went over at the start on how to really develop a strong merch planning process. It's important to have those strong foundations, because then you come into the assortment planning piece, which is where you start to reconcile from those top line financial plans into the actual bottoms up inventory line aspect of it. So assortment planning is where we come in and start building bottoms up. How do those individual SKUs reconcile with those top line financial plans? Through different concepts, we start to rationalize the assortment and understand what worked, what didn't last year, and how can we start building out our seasonal and core products to optimize on that. And then, of course, the POs are automatically generated out from there into your ERP like NetSuite, or exported out into your PO management tool. Those decisions, of course, then continue to flow through into allocation. So this is if your team has brick and mortar stores, you can start to think about the movement of the products into those locations. And this is where we'll finish the demo today. So how do we have the initial allocation of the store, or the goods to the stores rather, which is coming from those initial plans in the assortment planning module? And then how does the system optimize the replenishment of those products to continue to hit the demand needed to hit those financial plans that we set, of course, back in the merchandise planning module? So, of course, this is one cohesive process that your team is probably managing in disconnected spreadsheets right now, and we'll be able to show how it is seamless today throughout the process. So we'll do a super high level demo of all of that, but if anything catches your eye, please send a message in the chat to Jen or follow up with us afterwards, and we're happy to dig in a little bit further. Anything else you want to add there, Jen, before we dive in?
No, Gigi, I think you nailed it. I think I'm ready to see the tool.
All right, perfect. Oh, cool. Stop me at any time. But wanted to first get started with a quick overview of the system, and that typically happens here in our dashboarding section. So quick way to get a taste of sales on a Monday morning, for example. As you can see here, the dashboards and the rest of the tool are web-based, so everything's stored in the cloud, and it's going to act as one central repository for all of those merchandising decisions and the data points there. So all of your team members are operating in one cloud-based platform here and can be doing it synchronously. Everyone can be in the tool at once. From here, the dashboards are something you can create for the totality of your team. So when everyone logs in, they're going to see the same performance summaries. You know that your team's going to be on the same page about how things are performing across the team. I remember at TJX, we'd have a company-wide report sent out that everybody would see pre-Monday morning. You know what kind of mood your boss would be in. This is a great way to start to see that. So things like sales, margin, turn, anything that your team wants to see here, these are easy to configure and drill down into. Maybe you want to see your top 10 products for the week, for example. So quick and easy reporting from a dashboard sense here. Those are included with whatever modules you get started with. If, for example, you only used allocation, these would be allocation-specific dashboards. From there, there's, of course, much more robust reporting that we'll dig into, and that starts first and foremost in that merchandise plan that we talked about. So again, this is where you have the ability to create financial targets for the organization. And as you'll see, it's a very easy, simple to use grid-like interface. So we take the best parts of Excel, right? The copying and pasting, the summaries in the bottom here, the grid-based application. So it's going to be an easy transfer over to your current love to hate Excel aspects. But of course, we continue to build on that functionality. So I always hated having to understand how different formulas worked in the background. None of that being put together here. All of the metrics, we have 200 plus retail specific metrics like your margin, your receipt, maybe open to buy or different KPIs here, quickly available to any team member to add into the screens here, as well as any variance on those metrics. So LY, LLY, if you're getting crazy with it, or different percents to total, for example. Each team member can have their own views here and start to customize what is important from their perspective.
Gigi, question. If I don't see a metric that I want on here, is it possible to create my own metric?
Absolutely. So I would challenge you, Jen. I'm sure they'll be included, but if there's anything specific to your team that you need, you can come into our settings over here on your portal and quickly add in any metrics. You can also come into the settings and see how these metrics are being calculated if you're curious about the formulas on the back end.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. You know, from there, once you have all the metrics in, you can also start to play around with how you want to visualize them from a timing perspective. So weekly, monthly, yearly, or if you have specific collections you want to see, like you have a pre-fall collection, you're starting to plan lightweight outerwear, for example, you can start to come in and look at those specific collections as well. And then from there, also looking at the data from different perspectives. So Excel probably looks a lot like this. You see your typical tops down hierarchy, but you can also come in and start to sort in different ways that you wouldn't be able to in Excel here. So actually, let me come in and add a different grouping. I can come in and add channel, for example. Maybe I'm a wholesale heavy team and I want to see how wholesale versus D2C is performing versus stores, for example. I can come in here and start to see clothing across web, wholesale, and store, and see how the different aspects are performing in that respect. So great way for your different top line planners to see across their respective dependencies there, how things are performing, and start to manipulate the data. All of that functionality is available, of course, throughout the entire platform. But I'm going to back up and run through maybe a scenario here on how the team might actually use all that functionality we just highlighted. So pre-season, you might start to think about creating different planning scenarios. So creating one of those scenarios is as easy as coming in and seeding a plan. So we're bringing in past historical plans to be the seed of the future plans moving forward. So our target date here, let's just say all of 2025, for example, and I'll use the actual and the plan of this year, given we are 6 months through, as Jen highlighted at the beginning of the call. This year is flying by. So we have 6 months of actuals we can use from 2024, and then we'll use the rest of the plan data moving forward. So this will start to run in the background. You can see any of these things occurring here. And as this happens, you can come into 2025 and start to see that up 20% lift I put across the entire company here. So this 180 million is that ambitious target I have set for 2025. And I can come in and start to make those individual tweaks that I, as a planner, know are unique for my business. But that up 20% has already respected the total contributions to the curves there. So for example, if clothing was 20% of stores versus 30% of wholesale, it will respect their contributions to the mix in creating that initial forecast. And then as a planner, you come in and make those tweaks that you know about your business. For example, maybe I want to lock that up 20%. I want to keep that 180, but I know that things are going to differ this year versus last year. For example, I'm going to have a big clothing sale in September over here. And I think I'm actually going to do 12 million versus that initial 10. The system will then take that up to 12 million that I just changed. And anything here with a blue caret is where you'll see outputs are reflected, or changes are reflected rather. So for example, now that my inventory is peaking in September, my sales are slowing down the rest of the prior months to allow me to build up the inventory and hit those higher sales numbers in September. And then of course, they'll start to taper down in respect to their previous mix to support that growth while maintaining that overall 93 million I had previously set. So I can come in here, start to make and play around with those different changes. I can save those with comments, and typically what we see here is different planners coming in, playing around with their different categories, their different channels, for example. You come in here, you save it with a comment, and then pre-season, the planning manager, for example, might come in and start to look at all the different scenarios. So someone's proposing an August influencer campaign or July accessories, something's happening there. I can come in, look at all those different comments, and a team can come together, discuss on why these changes and these top line plans were made before then merging them into the master. So you would choose the scenarios the team is committing to. They would merge into the master scenario, which is what we have here. That master scenario then becomes your main source of truth that the rest of the system is trying to reconcile back with. So again, you create all of your different scenarios across the team, you come in, you create that master scenario, and that is what drives the decision-making in the rest of the module. So that's what you've committed to. That's what the system's going to hold you accountable to.
Gigi, is there a way that we can compare different scenarios to each other?
Absolutely. Yep. You can come in and start to show other scenarios. So for example, if I wanted to see this August influencer versus the February promo, I can start to see, you know, how are those affecting the different months in the different departments here as well. So if there's two conflicting scenarios, for example, you can definitely pull them into one screen and start to play around with them as well.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Cool. All right, Jen. So that top line master plan is now going to come into our assortment planning module, which I actually already have pulled up here. So just to quickly pop into our assortment planning module, this is where now we'll work bottoms up. So all of that work we just did top line is going to start to drive those decisions here in the assortment planning module. And I love that you can constantly reconcile back to that. So this is a insight into those top line plans, which is especially helpful if you have different people running those top line versus those bottoms up plans. So this is constantly going to remind me if I'm overbuying in my assortment or if my margin's not where our finance team is saying it needs to be this year. Great way to keep the team honest and connected across the different plans here. So for example, this is saying for my men's outerwear holiday assortment, which I've been hearing a lot of teams are working on holiday right now. It's saying that I have, quite a lot of units to continue to place here. And that's because some of my units are living season over season. So I have some core products that are already in here that are making up that 5,700-ish units. But it's clear that I have a lot of newness to start placing in here. Before we go in and start to build out that newness, which is the best part of the job, I will say that the part that is very laborious at this point in Excel is automated out here in Toolio. So that's that demand planning piece, especially on those core products where the demand is predictable and you have historical sales to go off of. great to just automate out those demand plans. So the system will do that at the lowest level of granularity available to you. For example, here it's happening at the cluster level because this product is available to go to stores. And the system's going to create those demand plans out into the future for you. So you can look at it from an original plan perspective, how the system has suggested it. You can also make your own tweaks and start to see, how does my plan differ from what Toolio is, and start to build trust in the system on those demand plans. And of course, moving forward into the future, the system will be able to retrend on how the actuals are coming in and start to update the plans from there. Users can make any changes to this as they need, but of course, those core products to automate those demand plans out is always key.
Gigi, we have a question from Kelsey. What are the challenges / downside of having the top-down plans fed in from another system?
It's a good question and something we hear often. I will say, you do miss that reconciliation piece. So we'll have to talk about what those output look like. And it might, it would depend on what we're able to extract from the other plan. So if you do already have an incumbent solution in where you're planning the merchandising plan in a different solution, we can talk to you how to ingest those into Toolio. The value of having them in one system here is that you can quickly see how they're reconciling and go back and make changes respective to each one. So happening in one place, of course, is key, but we can talk through, what that might look like if you're bringing it from a different solution. It's a case-by-case basis there.
Yeah. So Kelsey, feel free to reach out to us after this too, if you have any more questions about that.
Yeah, we'll have to drill into what's available. I think she mentioned BY there. So we'll have to talk about, what's actually available from the system and those exports. But cool. So regardless if you're using our merchandise plan or driving bottoms up from your external plans, I think a great piece of value here is the rationalization piece. Remember having these conversations where, you're kind of just repeating year over year what's working. And at least at TJX, that was deadly for our treasure hunt model. So teams these days, I've been reading a lot about retailers. Customers are demanding newness and excitement to stand out from the crowd. So rationalization is going to be key here. This is where Toolio will take all of your historical data and start to cleanse that historic data for anomalies, maybe things like out of stocks or products that didn't perform near the rest of the assortment. The goal here is to eliminate that long tail. So what are those bottom 3 products that we spent too much money on? They didn't perform, someone took a risk and it didn't work. Where are they, and can we replace them? So again, this is added value from connecting back to those top line plans in Toolio, because the system will start to recommend how many products we need to hit those financial plans. So it's not only reconciling and cleaning up your past assortments, but it's then connecting back to those top line plans and saying, okay, to do that, this is how many choices you should have. So for example, here it's recommending 13 choices for our men's Target assortment. Of course, if I have some buyers that are really excited about a certain product, we can play around with the depth and buy deeper into that product, for example, and see what that would do to the productivity of our SKUs. Or maybe we want to go the other way and we have a bigger assortment we're excited about. We can make the assortment more wide and start to see how the productivity needs to vary for then. All of this is then circling back to those top line plans and starting to reconcile to make sure that each one of these productivities is hitting those top line goals that we had previously set. Then you can come in, push these choices into your assortment plan and continue to build out that newness. So for example, this is saying, we have 13 choices we need. We can come in and start to build out what those choices should be to reconcile, of course, as we had before, to those top line financial plans. So constantly keeping that conversation going. We're looking at what we need to hit with those updated rationalization numbers. And I think a great way to do that is to start and come in and compare to those previous assortments. So we're looking to hit those financial objectives. At any point, we're reconciling back to those. And there are a few different ways to do this. So for example, right now I'm looking at fall of last year, and I have automatically all those historical data points available to me, any of those 200 metrics we looked at earlier. And this is where I come in and start to decide on which products I want to move forward with. So a few different ways you can do that. You might want to, for example, just extend a core product into the future. Maybe this Blake jacket performed really well last fall and we're going to bring it forward. We can also extend, that would be our repeat function. So you're repeating a core product year over year. You can also extend it. So extend is where maybe you had a product that is performing really good right now, and we want to extend it further into that season. So we want to continue placing purchase orders. The system can also take into account from that respect. Or maybe you want to create a new like for like placeholder. So I love this Blake jacket, but we've done it the last 3 years and it's starting getting a little stale. You can come in and take that placeholder and take those sales curves and those margin targets from that product, but know that you're going to have to come in and take this placeholder and talk about it with the team on what we can start to replace that product with. So now we're creating those placeholders or those actual choices. It's reconciling and reminding us what we still need to do from a top line perspective. And then as those designs start to come in from the product team, thinking back to that tech stack we reviewed at the start, you can also connect back to your PLM here. So for example, we love the team over at WFX. We have quite a few customers using them. This is connecting back to the style bank that we call it of all the products that were created back in WFX, for example. So let's say, I have this placeholder of that beige jacket. I've been talking with our product team. They created this modular beige jacket to go on top of it or to replace it. I can drag it on top and take that product and directly associate it from the PLM directly into Toolio. So now those two products across the system are associated to one another, and I can come in and start to play around with different selections on that product I might need. Of course, those same demand plans that we looked at for the core products will also be allocated out to those new products that we create here, all the way down to that lowest level of granularity. And Jen and I had a fun conversation with our VP of product the other day who taught us about the intense algorithm that is happening on the machine learning engine here on the automated clusters. Definitely something we can dig into with those store heavy teams, but the system is deciding where those clusters should happen through a k-means algorithm and starting to allocate product out from there. So something interesting to think about, and we'd love to dive in further with one of our product experts. Definitely not my area of expertise, and I'm sure you would agree, Jen, but a lot of fun and very helpful machine learning happening as you start to think about where should products go in those initial buys, which then of course helps out in the allocation side of things. So we've started to create our assortment. There's still a lot of work to do, but I'm closing that gap. I also love to come in and look at this from a visual perspective. So I can start to see, what does my assortment look like visually? Do my launch dates make sense? For example, the weight of the jacket. I actually ran men's outerwear over at Marshall's, and to have such a lightweight windbreaker in January wouldn't make any sense. So I might come in here and change the launch date to a different time frame. This is a playground as well. So you can come in, make changes here, and start to see from a visual perspective how your products are performing. And then, of course, from there, the system will recommend out all of those purchase orders. So once you've committed to what your assortment looks like, the system will take into account minimum order quantities, lead times, all of those different necessities from a vendor perspective, and then create those POs. If you're using NetSuite, those POs can automatically push into the purchase order section of NetSuite to be actioned on from there. We also see teams using them as a CSV export. We can definitely talk through, unique to your current PO management process, how we would support that in Toolio today. Awesome. Jen, any questions on assortment planning? I know that's your favorite as well.
It is my favorite. It's so intense and I love it. We actually do not have any questions right at the moment.
Awesome. All right. Well, allocation is where Jen and I got started. So this is always fun to end the process here. To reiterate, we talked about the dashboards first. That's where you start to come in and get a quick overview of the business. Merchandise plan is where you do the financial planning aspect. So we're setting our top level targets there. Maybe you're doing that at a store plan, a day plan, or a long range plan, but all of that's happening for those top level targets, which then drive the assortment planning module. That's where you build out the newness and the seasonal goods, and you're starting to decide what clusters are the products going to go to and when is it going to be available. Those decisions now affect the allocation module here, where you start to look at, how do we get the product to where it needs to be for those target sales? So starting an allocation here, this is the output of the strategies we'll create after this. So I can drill into this and start to understand where product is going to land. So for example, store 9, you can start to see how many short sleeve shirts they'll expect to have at any point in time. Of course, you can adjust this time frame. Right now, I'm looking at the next 8 weeks. So quick way to start to see the output of the strategies and do a gut check week to week on where inventory is landing. But the big meat of the allocation module here is the actual creation of those strategies. So as somebody asked earlier, allocation can also operate independently. You don't need to be using merchandise plan or assortment plan to use this module, but I will point out some of the added functionality. If you were to connect back to assortment plan and merchandise plan, the system is highly automated in that way. But regardless, an allocation strategy from the ground up thinks about quite a few different things. So for example, what is the product? Where is the product going to go? When is the product going to be available? And how much do we think we're going to sell of that product? All of this information can pull from the assortment planning module. So for example, we just planned out this flag cap. The buyers decided it was going to go to all stores and this is when it's going to be available. And it's important to continuously allocate back to how the product was originally purchased to understand and be able to actually meet those demands. If, for example, I just changed this to all stores, but the buyers had only bought it for the top 10, we're going to quickly run out of inventory and not have it be in the right place. So we think there is strong value in connecting this back to assortment plan so the decisions from the buyers and that initial purchase continue to flow down and are actually action upon in season. So all of this information could come from the assortment planning module, but if you're a store heavy team, maybe a core heavy team, these decisions can also be inputted here. So you can start deciding the location lists, which are dynamically updating in the back end of the platform. You can play around with the start dates, the demand types, or different location curves, for example. All of this is easily configured by the end user in the platform and manipulated. And then from here, you can start to drill down and see how those strategies are starting to affect that individual product. So similar to back in assortment planning, where the system automated out those demand plans into the future, those demand plans come back in an allocation plan here. So I can see how this embroidered cap is flowing to store 1, 2, maybe they're not getting anything at the C-level stores down here on the back end. So this is going to all stores, but you can come in and start to see that those 1,000 units that we have, how are they flowing throughout the store base that we have? So once you drill into those allocation strategies, the user or the allocator might have some individual tweaks they want to make, but on average, we see most teams starting to simply do exception management here. So the system is allocating out based on those strategies that you create. So as new products come in, an allocator will have to create those strategies. And then their day-to-day looks more like, putting in different constraints, for example. Maybe, Disney, they require us to have certain presentation profiles that the buyer didn't previously input. I can come in here and start to put in, okay, I have a Disney profile that I need to have, and that will make sure we have certain minimums. That would be where an allocation analyst might come in and add those initial tweaks. From there, they can come in and rerun those different allocations and start to see what the output of those looks like and start to play around with all of the great reporting that we have here. So I really love this report that shows, the product spread across the different stores. For example, looks like store 10 here is pretty light on inventory across the board. And, this icon player's jacket. So if you can come in, create any of these reports, they work pretty similar to big pivot tables where you can come in and decide on what you want to see, what is key information, and start to look for those exceptions that the team needs to manage. Maybe, for example, you see that this windbreaker is not doing great across the board. Maybe you want to hold some of the products because weather is not cooperating with us. We can come in and hold that inventory. Or, we see that this Blake jacket that we keep talking about, it's killing it. Maybe we want to push out the rest of that inventory and really have a presence in the store. That's where we see an allocator spending their day to day. So Jen, I know we covered a lot, but a quick overview. At any point, the team can come in here. Everyone's working in one cohesive platform. They can come in and get a taste of how things are performing in the dashboards, and then come into their respective modules and start making their changes. Top line planner or the financial team might work mostly in merchandise plan, which we call MP here at Toolio. If you ever hear that being bounced around, that's where they do those top line financial plans. Then we see buyers or planners living in the assortment planning module where they're creating those demand plans and the core and new product line planning. Then allocation is where the true allocators or anyone running the brick and mortar location starts to move that product from the assortment plan into the real life presentation in the stores. You can start to think about things like promotions, optimizing sales curves, or those automated clustering that we talked about. All of that is happening in the background of the core platform here, but wanted to give just a quick overview of what that functionality looks and feels like. And then from there, we can dig into the individual needs of a team as we get on more individual calls. But Jen, anything you think we're missing?
No, nothing off the top of my head. I think you covered all of the great capabilities that Toolio has.
Awesome. And I see you've been answering any questions for us in the chat, but if anybody else has questions coming up, definitely let us know. And we're happy to answer them, or happy to always hop on a call. I know retail looks and feels so similar, but everyone's got their own unique needs that we can talk through in more depth.
Definitely. Hey, we're all good with the questions, Gigi.
Awesome. All right, anyone. Well, I'm Gigi at Toolio.com and Jen's Jen at Toolio. So if you need us, you can reach us pretty easily. Send over any questions. We're happy to talk in further depth. Cool.
Awesome.